I'm Teresa Coraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today, I want to look at Gaza and whether it is a jailbreak that is designed to be a trap or designed to be a trap that becomes a jailbreak. And to do that, I'll start with Vanessa Beeley, whose commentary on the Middle East I've really come to depend on. And then I'll follow with Substacker Jimmy Changa, who linked to a video that was done by David Icke. And he quotes Fletcher Prouty, who I recently had talked about in another episode. And then I'll go to something that Francis Leader had linked to by Max Igan. And he has a very nuanced view that confirms many of the things I had been leaning towards and raises that question. And then I'm going to end with an unusual segue into the Russell Brand controversy and how that has been perceived by Matthew Crawford and why I think that relates to this issue. And then I'll end by saying why we are all Palestinian. Let's do this. Vanessa Beeley's recent episode is called Palestine is Fighting for Survival, and I recommend watching her whole op-ed that I think has a lot of good information in it. She includes a quote from a young girl who is in Gaza, and she writes, "When I read posts shocked at how I'm not condemning Hamas in this point in time, I feel once again inferior. My value as a human is not seen the same. While we are in the most traumatic and gut-wrenching moments of our lives, there are some who believe now it is the time to say we have to condemn. We have to say that love trumps all. I fucking wish, I truly goddamn wish that love trumps all, that it is love that leads revolutions. I wanted for my whole life to believe that by protesting long enough, by supporting BDS long enough, by writing long enough, I am actively making a difference. Well, I wasn't. Not in the way that might save my people's existence. In Gaza, despite bombs being dropped overhead, despite us losing tens and tens of our own family members right this very second, they know that if it is not now, it will be later. They know this because their whole lives, that is all they had to see. They had to see mutilated bodies. They had to see their children dismembered in front of them, and they had to see their futures destroyed. Each war and assault on Gaza, it is the same. Each war, the amount dead was dismissed and treated lesser than. Our humanity is not valued, for if it was, so would be our pursuit for liberation. I feel like as soon as I'm ready to face a certain fact, it comes at me from all directions. And so I think all three commentators have mentioned that Hamas was set up by Israel, something I didn't know. That during the election of Hamas to government, there were Israeli soldiers on every corner making sure that was the outcome, and that those rockets that are simple pipes set up that are powered by fertilizer have been things that were done intentionally by Hamas as ordered by Israel in order to be able to trigger the retaliations. Is this then more of the same? David Icke quotes Fletcher Prouty in saying, "An assassination doesn't need to be planned. The active role is in permitting it." Many different people have talked about how all of the borders are watched, and there isn't any way for this big equipment in order to enable this to have gotten through those borders unless Israel put down the security and also sent a lot to the escalations that they've caused on the West Bank, and therefore took the security attention off away from the Gaza border. This is something that Vanessa talks about, though, as being not just Hamas, but also involving all of the other different countries and groups that are surrounding, like Syria, like Jordan, and even Saudi Arabia has not ended up condemning Hamas for this. So certainly Iran is being considered part of that. And this may be something that is trying to target Iran with the retaliation for this. I've even seen some ridiculous things that talk about how it's all Trump's fault because Trump gave the security information to Putin, I think it was, and then Putin gave it to China, and China gave it to Iran, and then Iran gave it to Hamas in Palestine. So, of course, this is all Trump's fault. So there are a lot of different stories that are going around for how this could happen. And I think that that could be true. And also that, of course, the Palestinians have the right of self-defense. To me, that's not even part of this issue. And so I'm looking at this as a question of strategy, not as a moral question. I'll link to an episode I did at the end, which is called Is Our Love Being Pimped for Profit?, in which Arundhati Roy is someone I quote talking about the Gondification of NGOs and how in 1 year they all engaged in sugar daddy politics, where big foundations started funding them and they said, we will no longer support anything except nonviolent resistance. And as she points out, that's fine if you've got star power like Gandhi behind you. But if you're miles away from anything in the jungle or behind a wall, then that doesn't count for anything. David Icke uses the term collective punishment, which I consider to be another psyops. It implies that punishment is warranted, but not everybody. This goes back to this concept of the terrorist and that people can be terrorists in their own country. The original term terrorist, I was informed by Max Igan, was termed when there was a false flag blowing up of the original ships that were bringing Jews into Palestine. This was later found to have been done by MI6 in something called Operation Embarrass. And one of the biggest ones was the blowing up of the King David Hotel. That was done by Benjamin Emanuel, a Jew and the grandfather or great-grandfather of Rahm Emanuel, and then blamed on the Palestinians. I also had no idea until I saw in his video that the Balfour Declaration was written, Dear Lord Rothschild, and that it ends with, please bring this to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. It might as well say, so that they know that I fulfilled my part of the deal. What in the world was the payment for that? Max Igan also confirmed what I had just learned in my David Irving episode, that Hitler had transferred in 1933 20,000 Jews to Palestine, along with farm equipment that in today's dollars would be $100 million worth. And so that is all documented in a book by Edwin Black called The Transfer Agreement. Many have commented that this is 50 years to the day from the Yom Kippur War, and that is especially a Zionist deep state tell, because as Isaac Middle of Australia points out, this is all in the Jubilee and the Shemitahs, and something that would be much more characteristic for that timing. Another potential tell is how much footage was ready for release the day after, whether these are events that are faked, whether they are real, whether they are staged. In some cases, we see someone being taken off as a hostage and she's taking selfies and practically adjusting her lipstick. We also have some footage of prisoners who are being held in Palestine, and it's girls who are being treated humanely, who are talking on their phones. The only fear that they have is that the building is shaking from Israel bombing the area where they're being held. So these are all things that are being broadcast so much more widely than any conflict ever has been when it was against Gaza. And in terms of Robert F. Kennedy, I no longer care whether he's naive, complicit, or captured. I don't care whether he could resolve medical freedom and guarantee a good economy. I will never support the man in anything from this point out. How does this relate to Russell Brand? Matthew Crawford has been doing a series on whether Russell is a sexual predator and also, I think, is part of the Zionist deep state, if I can call it that. I'm not sure about the evidence for either of those, but in particular, they make no sense to me being put together. I think the role that gave Russell his celebrity, the one that he played throughout the time he was in Hollywood, was that hypersexual one. And that is rampant. I was just with my daughter for the weekend, and she listens to rap, and the misogyny and violence and disdain for women and sexualization is so prevalent that if we wanted to condemn that, there are no shortage of people that we could be targeting and scrutinizing rather than someone who has been married for a number of years and is about to expect their third child. So that's something that doesn't make sense to me as something that we are targeting right now. And it also makes no sense that this would be something that would be coming up at this exact time. Why is the timing of these two media events being so close together? What Russell did in 2009 was make very clear statements in defense of Gaza and condemning their treatment by Israel. Soon after that was when the honeypot, Katy Perry, was unleashed on him, and eventually he walked away from that within a little over a year. Rape is not about sex. It's about violence. I am not against sex in any form. I am always against violence. And I think that this is a violence that's being done against Russell, against his reputation, in order to shut him up and to make sure that he cannot be someone who's talking about what's happening right now in Israel and shining any light on that. I want to end with Vanessa Beeley, who said, "I never thought I'd live to see this." I keep saying that about so many things. It feels like there's so much in flux and things are changing so quickly. And there's these little things that I keep seeing resolve in a way that is better than I could have imagined. So whether or not it's being planned by the oligarchs, it doesn't mean that it will turn out the way they think it will. I think that we are all Palestinians, and the way that this goes is going to be something that foreshadows the freedom of all of us. To follow up, here is Our Love Being Pimped for Profit, and also The Trials of David Irving. And please check out the description on YouTube and go to the Substack where it will have all these links, because there was way too much information for me to encapsulate. Thank you for watching.